Hello, my name is Warnanyoni from ICAS Botswana, and I'm here to talk about overdose awareness. I'm sure you must have seen our disc drop on Overdose Awareness Day, and we're here to talk about the meaning of this overdose awareness and what it relates to. As you know, there has been an increase of drug use among young people, especially young professionals in the corporate world, as well as young people in the working world in general. Basically, overdose means when someone takes a substance more than the required amount of a substance. And it could be a prescribed medication, it could be an illegal substance, it could be a legal substance such as alcohol. So overdose happens, for instance, when someone takes too much alcohol and their body is unable to handle that much substance, and the body might collapse or it might break down. Now, why is it important to talk about overdose and what it is? Basically because it's dangerous and it can lead to death. So what leads to overdose? Let's talk science. So our body has what is known as a reward system. And this reward system is responsible for making sure that we repeat behaviors that are good for us. And this reward system also gives us pleasure as we repeat these behaviors. So what are these behaviors that are good for us? Eating, exercising, socializing. How does this reward system work? It functions through a hormone in our body called dopamine, which is the feel-good hormone. Now, this feel-good hormone gives us pleasure. So when you socialize with your friends, you experience pleasure. When you eat a good meal, a delicious meal, you experience pleasure. And when you exercise, that feel-good hormone is released and you feel stimulated and refreshed. So this reward system is actually beneficial for us. But now when we put toxic substances into the mix, like alcohol, like illegal substances like cocaine and cat, then the reward system still functions the same way. It still gives you pleasure. However, when a substance has been introduced into the body, it increases the amount of pleasure that a person experiences. It's a heightened level of pleasure that we've never experienced before. And so once that happens, we are unable to get pleasure from the natural activities like exercise, like spending time with your family, and other healthy activities that we do. So let's explain how overdose happens. In order for overdose to happen, addiction needs to have taken place. Now, how does one get addicted to substances? As we mentioned before, we've got the feel-good hormone that is called dopamine. Now, when a substance is taken like cocaine or any other illegal substances or even alcohol, when we take in that substance, we experience 10 times more dopamine than we get from our natural rewards, like doing an activity that you enjoy. You experience 10 times more pleasure than that. And then with that experience, you are unable to fulfill the dopamine requirement, meaning that if you've taken 10 times if you've experienced 10 times the dopamine in your body, you're never going to be able to replace that. Not with the most pleasurable activity like exercise or eating or socializing or even drinking your favorite juice. So because these high dopamine levels cannot be reached, we keep taking a substance thinking that it's going to take us there to that first explosive experience we had. So how does addiction fit into this? So addiction happens because you're completely engaged in trying to fulfill that need for more dopamine, and your body gets used to it, so you start to have physical cravings, and your mind gets used to it, so you start thinking about the substance 24/7. And so the more you think about the substance, the more your body craves it, the more substance you take. Unfortunately, our body can only handle so much of a substance. Now, when our bucket is completely full, that's when we experience overdose. One thing we need to consider when it comes to substances is the accessibility of a substance. It's the use of a substance. It's how much it costs, where people can find it. Those are all things to consider when we think about a substance. Let's think about the most used substance, which is alcohol. It's the most used substance, it's a legal substance, and we use it in our everyday lives without even considering its consequences. It does lead to death, in terms of maybe causing car accidents and causing various other accidents. But when it comes to overdose and overuse of alcohol, it's something, unfortunately, that is socially acceptable. So when we use alcohol at weddings, when we use alcohol for celebrations, we don't think about how much of that substance we're taking. How many drinks am I having? Is my body okay after 4 drinks? Is my body okay after 6, after 10 drinks? How many drinks do I limit myself to before I get to alcohol poisoning? So how does that contribute to the issue we're talking about today, overdose? Now, because alcohol is so culturally acceptable, it creeps into society without us even realizing it. In fact, the brewing of alcohol in our homes, it's a culturally acceptable thing. We even use it in some ceremonies, right? So we can produce our own alcohol, and with the production of alcohol means that we can't even limit the alcohol content or the percentage of alcohol, and that can lead to overdose because we have not controlled for the amount that the body can take in. Don't get us wrong, we're not saying that indulging in the beverage every now and again and the responsible use of alcohol is a bad thing. We are simply saying that its use is something that needs to be monitored and taken care of so that it doesn't lead to overdose. Now, another reason why it's important for us to look at alcohol is because it's very prevalent. We use it all over the world, it's everywhere. But at the same time, alcohol is a gateway drug. Now let's go back to what we were saying about dopamine and how we experience pleasure from taking in substances. Alcohol brings about that very same sensation of experiencing pleasure. Now, when someone takes alcohol and they feel like the alcohol is not giving them that feeling anymore, that pleasure anymore, it's not as satisfactory anymore, they'll possibly turn to another substance, like cocaine, for instance. And then that experience of cocaine is the most amazing. We experience another high shot of dopamine. And then somebody could graduate from cocaine to something even stronger. Or maybe they might take more cocaine to experience that same pleasure. And that sort of addictive cycle can lead to overdose. So there are a variety of different substances that people take for different purposes. So to get into a few of these substances that are available here in Botswana especially, there is cocaine, there is a substance called cat, there is nyaope, there is marijuana, and sometimes even a combination and mix of these substances. So these are some of the substances that are circulating in the country. Now the question becomes, okay, now if we know that substances are dangerous if we know that substances can lead to death, or the use and abuse of them can lead to death, why do people end up using substances? People end up using substances for different reasons. Sometimes an individual can have early adverse childhood experiences, maybe trauma in childhood, and they've never recovered from those traumas. So substances provide that good feeling. It's a coping mechanism for dealing with trauma. Sometimes people experience high pressure stress. It could be any variety of stress coming from marriage, stress coming from work, and to cope with that stress, they may find themselves using a substance to cope. Another one that is really interesting, especially in these days, is the occupational stress. Organizations have targets, demanding targets. People are forced to be at work beyond the normal working hours so that those targets can be reached, and it can be detrimental. Now, when somebody feels like they cannot cope with the occupational stress, they might say, you know what, let me take a glass of wine to sleep. I can't sleep. I'm so stressed about work, I can't sleep. So I find myself taking a glass of wine every night to sleep. And then the more they do that, they develop a dependence. The more they develop that dependence, it becomes an addictive cycle, which leads to overdose in the end. So you find that in the corporate world, with very high and demanding targets, someone may have heard about the fact that cocaine can help you concentrate, it can keep you up, and you can work without losing any steam. And that's how they might get into cocaine or other substances. Now, peer pressure is another one, especially for young people going to university, young people in high school. They see other young people maybe getting money. Some children in high school are selling substances in schools. I know that even as early as primary school, there are some children who are selling substances. So maybe children that associate substances with provision, with money, I can buy this, I can get what I want, they might get into substances. So there are a variety of reasons that people get into substances. Okay, so now let's talk about how you might tell that someone has an overuse problem, has an abuse problem, has an addiction, and how you can tell that someone might be headed on the road to overdose. The physical and behavioral signs that you might see might be if somebody is walking into the house or into the office dizzy, they might be smelling like a substance. And we also have to recognize that with these new substances these days, they don't have an odor. So you might see bizarre behavior, acting out of the norm. If it's a work-related situation, somebody is walking into the workplace slightly unkempt, and you can tell that maybe they haven't taken a shower, maybe they are unable to take care of their own personal hygiene. That is another sign. Maybe if you're a parent at home and you have bottles of wine, your children could be drinking, those alcoholic beverages and replacing it with water or juice. You might find that a pair of scissors keeps disappearing. Maybe they're using that pair of scissors as apparatus, for drug use, right? You might find that maybe you've got a child, who's always in trouble. There's an accident this week. The following week you have to be called by police. There's so many destructive things that are going on in this young person's life, and you can't really figure it out. And sometimes another sign of substance misuse and abuse is violent behavior. Substances can alter our moods, and they can alter our behavior and our thinking. So when you're under the influence of a substance, you might think that something that we consider dangerous is safe. Someone might think that jumping off a building is a good idea under the influence of a substance. So if we note those kind of behaviors, we might realize that, okay, I'm going to the police often. I am finding out that this week it's a broken window. The following week there's items in the household missing, like microwaves. That's an extreme cases where maybe a young person might steal a microwave, sell it, for a score to buy drugs. Now, how do we recognize it in the workplace? You might see higher levels of absenteeism. They might have lower performance. Their performance might be affected. They might be late. They might cause conflict or disruptions in the workplace. They might go missing for days on end and we can't seem to find them. So those are some signs that we can see in the workplace. Somebody might, even if they might not have outwardly visible behavior, they seem irritable, they seem edgy, they seem antsy, they can't sit in one place. Those might be signs of somebody withdrawing from a substance, right? So it's very, very important for us to look out for some of those symptoms, strange behaviors, missing items, and so on and so forth. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list, but now that might lead parents out there, that might lead managers out there, organizations to wonder, what can we do? One of the first things that people do is they try to talk people out of substance use, which often doesn't work, because you're talking to someone who is physically affected and psychologically affected by a toxic substance. You could talk as much as you want, but because of the substance inside of the body, they can't hear you. And even if they had a desire to stop taking that substance, they can't do it because the cravings and the urges are so strong. Sometimes cravings and urges to take a substance are so strong that it could lead to death. So, as we were discussing earlier on, that one of the solutions that we run to is trying to talk someone out of substance use, which often doesn't work. Why is that? This is because someone is dealing with both a medical and psychological condition at the same time. It requires the intervention of medical professionals because that person's body, physical body, has toxins inside of them that is controlling their behavior, their emotions, their actions. And then from a psychological point of view, there is the cycle of addiction where you cannot stop thinking about a substance and you feel like this substance can solve your problems. Now, what can be done in this case? What is the solution? So, interventions that are both medical and psychological, and sometimes even social, are necessary. So, from the medical point of view, if someone is currently going through an overdose, maybe having seizures, maybe panicking, maybe bleeding from the nose, maybe coughing or sweating, that requires medical attention. So this just serves as a reminder that we at ICAS are here for you. We will leave our details, our contact details online.